Harry and no one else. But we'd love it if you could keep your video on or turn it on so Harry has an audience of faces to perform to. There'll be a short Q&A after Harry's performance, and you can type your questions into the chat box, and then we'll get to those at the end. And that's all from me. I really hope you enjoy this evening's performance. And Harry, it's over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. Can people just sort of do a kind of nod if you can hear me? This is so exciting to have actual faces. You are wonderful. Thank you. My name is Harry Baker. I am a poet. I also study maths at university. And what that means is I used to do maths and poetry as a fun thing on the side. And now I'm a full-time poet. I've started doing maths for fun, which confused me as much as anyone else, I think. But I've come back to the two for reasons I will explain with this new show, I Am 10,000. And one of the things that maths and poetry do have in common is that a lot of people think they don't like it, so you have to trick them. And that is exactly how I got into poetry. I was tricked through these events called poetry slams. And a poetry slam is a way of making poetry sound exciting by putting a cool word like slam on the end. And all it is that people take it in turns to perform poems. At the end, you're given a scorecard out of 10. You take off the top and the bottom. And if you get the highest score, you get to call yourself a slam champion. I loved it because I got to see other people perform poems and I got to do my poems. And in between, I got to do some counting. So it's just nonstop entertainment. And I became the London Slam champion. I was invited to go to the UK Slam Championship to represent London. And then I was invited to go along to the Poetry World Cup. And I hadn't heard of it either. However, it took place in Paris, in France, and there were 20 different poets from 20 different countries all over the world performing head-to-head, ready to be judged by 5 random French people in the audience. And I think if poetry is hard to judge at the best of times, when you've got me going up against an Estonian freestyle rapper, going up against an old Italian man who's reading his poetry from a music stand, and everyone secretly hopes he's going to break out and start singing opera, it is naturally very hard to judge. However, I got through to the final, and in the final I got the most points. So I thought I would start off this evening's performance with what is technically speaking the best poem in the world, according to 5 random French strangers. They are my favourite 5 random French strangers. If any of them are in tonight, then merci. But this poem is called Paper People, and it goes like this. I like people. I'd like some paper people. They'd be purple paper people. Maybe pop-up purple paper people. Proper pop-up purple paper people. How do you prop up proper pop-up purple paper people? I hear you cry. Well, I'd probably prop up proper pop-up purple paper people with the proper pop-up purple people paper clip. But I pre-prepare appropriate adhesives as alternatives, a cheeky backup just in case the paper slipped, because I could probably pop up Metropolis. But I wouldn't want to deal with all those paper people politics, paper politicians with their paper thin policies, broken promises without appropriate apologies. There'd be a little paper me and a little paper you. We could watch paper TV and it would all be pay-per-view. We'd see those poppy paper rappers rap about the paper package, or watch paper people garage get stuck in paper traffic on the A4 paper. There'd be a paper Princess Kate. We'd all stare at paper Pippa, and we'd all live in fear of Killer Jack the Paper Ripper, because the paper propaganda propagates the people's prejudices. Papers painting pictures of the photogenic terrorist that is a little paper me and a little paper you. Then they pop up population, people's problems pop up too. There'd be that pompous paper parliament who remained out of touch and who ignored the people's protests about all those paper cuts. And then those peaceful paper protests would get blown to paper pieces by those confetti cannons by preemptive police. And yes, there'd still be paper money. So there'd still be paper greed, and those paper piggy bankers pocketing more than they need, purchasing the potpourri to pepper the paper properties. Others live in poverty and aren't acknowledged properly, a proper poor economy where so many are proper poor. While those needs get ignored, the money goes to big wars. Origami armies unfold plans for paper planes, and we remain imprisoned by our own paper chains. But the greatest shame is that it always seems to stay the same. What changes is who's in power, choosing how to lay the blame, then naming names, forgetting these are names of people. Because in the end, it all comes down to people. I like people. Because even when the situation's dire, it is only ever people who are able to inspire on paper. It's hard to see how we all cope. But in the bottom of Pandora's box, there's still hope, and I still hope because I believe in people. People like my grandparents. Every single day since I was born, I've taken time out of their morning to pray for me. That's 8,396 days straight of someone checking I'm okay. And that's amazing. People like my aunt who puts on plays with prisoners. People who are capable of genuine forgiveness. People go out of their way to make your life better and expect nothing in return. You see, people have potential to be powerful. Just because the people in power tend to pretend to succumb to that system. And the paper population is not different. There's a little paper me and a little paper you. And we could watch paper TV and it would all be pay-per-view. And in a pop-up population, people's problems pop up too. But if the whole world fell apart, then we'd still make it through. Because we're people. Thank you so much. This is so wonderful to have actual faces to perform to. Obviously, this isn't an ordinary gig, but a new sensation is that I've got gallery view up and there's 6 different variations. So just in between poems, I'm going to switch to another kind of cross-section of the audience and then maybe see who's got the friendliest faces. And I don't think you can tell who I'm looking at, so I won't offend anyone. But you all look completely lovely, thank you. There is a number in that poem which is 8,396. And that is because as I was writing it, my mum told me my grandparents had been praying for me every day since I was born. And I grew up in the church, but I think whether or not you come from a background of faith, that's an amazing thing to discover. And so I used to change that number every time I performed the poem based on how many days old I was as a reference to that incredible fact. And then when I was 8,396 days old, my grandpa died. And I paused it on that number out of a reference to him. But it's meant that I've always been aware of how old I was in days, which I've since been told is not an ordinary thing to do. But that meant I was always aware that on the 5th of August last year, I was going to turn 10,000 days old, which I think is a birthday we don't celebrate enough. And so to celebrate that, I thought I would go up to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and create a show called I Am 10,000, coming back to the maths and the poetry side by side to see how I felt about it now, because for a long time, I told myself the two are very separate. When I announced I was going to do a show called I Am 10,000, my friend Emma, who I studied maths with, just said to me, doesn't that mean that you are 16 in binary? Which I wish I had thought of. But what I've since worked out is that in Roman numerals, 10,000 is just which I think is way more fun. And it's usually that point in a live show when I can tell how many mathematicians are in the audience. One of my favorite online gigs I've done was an online maths teachers conference. So they really are the best of people. I don't know if any of them are in tonight. As I was in my final year of uni, I was trying to work out if I could do the poetry full time, what it would look like to do the maths or not. And then in amongst that kind of decision, I decided that it would be a good idea to try and run a marathon. And I think another thing maths and poetry do have in common is they are both renowned for their athleticism. So I just thought, rather than do any kind of serious training, I would write a poem about it. Because that makes sense. So this poem is called A Mathematician's Guide to Surviving Your First Marathon. And I would like to dedicate it to the people I saw running along the seafront in Margate a week or two ago, or anyone who did a marathon from home, or just has been doing any kind of staying healthy or looking after yourselves in any way, because I think it's not an easy thing to do. But yeah, it goes like this. Tell yourself the first 5 miles don't really count. By the time you get to 6, stay focused on each checkpoint as they come. 6.214 miles and you have made it to 10K. 6.219 and it's officially 20 miles to go. 6.555 and you're at a quarter of the way. At times when things might feel impossible, just stick to what you know. There is a water station up ahead. You're almost at mile 7, which is just a half marathon away from mile 20. Then it's only another 6 and a bit until you are allowed to stop. Get to 7.5 miles and there is only 30K remaining. At 8 miles, make a joke to yourself about M&M. Soon you will have made it to 13 kilometers, which means that if kilometers are miles, you will pretty much be at the halfway point already. This means the real halfway point is just 1.6 times your current distance, meaning you're 5/8 of the way there, meaning you're 5/16 of the way to the total distance. Tell yourself not to dwell on the fact that 5/16 does not feel like very much. Instead, concentrate on the giant carrot that has just overtaken you. Challenge yourself to keep it within eyesight for the next half a mile. This will take you to the 8.73 mile mark. This is approximately 1/3 of the total distance. This means once you do this distance again, it would just be this distance to the end, and you know you can do this distance because you have just done it. Plus 1/3 feels way bigger than 5/16. Once you get to 10 miles, you would have made it to double figures. By 10.488, you will have got to 2/5. Reminisce on how the word 2/5 sounds like the word toothpicks if it was said with a mouthful of toothpicks where your tooth is. Toothpicks. Toothpicks. You'd be amazed at how much distance you can travel whilst you do this. Soon it's 42% of 42 kilometers, and then it's literally anything you can think of to make it to halfway. Once you step past this point, it would technically be further for you to turn around and run back to the start, so you may as well just keep on going. Notice how the 15-mile banner looks like the words "I smile." How I am way too tired to smile, but I do smile. They say smiles is the longest word in the English language because there is a mile between the two S's. They have clearly not come across the word schmarathons, as in marathons, schmarathons, as is something I used to say before I attempted a marathon. Not only do schmarathons have a full marathon between the S's, there is also a rogue H that somehow got lost along the way. Today, I am that H. My legs are currently hotter than they have ever been. I don't mean sun hitting the skin heat, I mean coming from within heat, as it's have centuries of central heating's entropy has entered me. It's at this point the mind descends to senseless censoring on centipedes. Like how if there was a centipede that measured just 1 centimeter, and you gave that to me to forward to your friend called Peter. Well, that's the centipede that sent to me to Centipede. Or how if they came together just to measure their collective we, we'd see the centipede, essentially a centiliter. Or how if Jesus let his friend attempt to represent the species, we'd see St. Peter's centripetal centipedes. The irony being getting obsessed with centipedes that somehow gives my legs a sense of peace, at least until we get to mile 17. By this point, the gaps between the milestones seem to stretch a little bigger. By 20 miles, you've technically got to double figures. That is like quadruple figures. That is like 1,000 miles. That is like I have run 500 miles and I have run 500 more. Do anything at this point to not get the proclaimer stuck in your head. And while you're at it, try not to worry about mum. If 24 miles is Christmas Eve, then 25 will feel like Christmas. By 26, it's almost more impressive if you don't go the full distance. If you carry on like this, you may just make it to the finish. The important thing is not to overthink it. Thank you very much. I think despite telling myself maths and poetry were these two big separate things, one of the main reasons I got into writing was because of maths. My school had a Battle of the Bands competition, and a lot of my friends were doing covers of their favourite sort of indie rock songs from the charts at the time. But me and my friend Luke were the two nerdy maths kids, so we thought it would be fun if we rewrote our favourite Jay-Z song and changed the words to be "I've got 99 problems, but maths ain't one," complete with an 81-digit pi solo, a choreographed dance routine, and a surprise costume change at the end. And we won a prize that evening for most potential, which did not exist at the start of the night. However, I loved that feeling of being creative with words and trying to entertain my friends. And soon after that, I went to a poetry open mic night, and I was amazed by what I saw, because there was serious poetry, there was funny poetry, it rhymed, it didn't rhyme. Everyone from all different backgrounds, ages, were just sharing their words. And there was something incredibly powerful about that. And I wanted to get involved. So I thought maybe I could do my 99 Problems maths rap without any music and see if I could get away with calling it a poem. So I performed this rap without any music, without my friend Luke there, and without any applause at the end or general atmosphere in the room. However, someone saw that performance and thought it stood out from everyone else's and said to me, "Harry, you seem like a nerd. I am running a poetry event where the theme is going to be prime numbers. We are going to get 25 poets to write poems about the first 25 prime numbers. If you'd like to get involved, you can pick your favorite between 2 and 97. We've all got a favorite, and then perform that alongside 24 other poems about prime numbers. Does that sound like a fun night out for a teenager in London?" And I said, "Oh my God, that sounds incredible. I would love to." And most of these poems were kind of like rhyming Wikipedia articles. However, I always liked prime numbers. They were the ones that didn't quite fit in, didn't quite follow the patterns we expected. And so I tried to tell more of a story with it. And that story is called 59. And it goes like this. 59 wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. Realizes all his hair is on one side of his head, takes just under a minute to work out that it's because of the way that he slept, he finds some clothes and gets dressed. Now, he can't help but look in the mirror and be subtly impressed how he looks rough around the edges and yet casually messed. And as he glances out the window, sees a slightly expressed with 60 from across the street. Now, 60 was beautiful. Perfectly trimmed cuticles, dressed in something suitable, were never rude or crude at all. Unimprovable. Right on time as usual, more on cue than a snooker ball, but liked to play it super cool. Faith now wanted to tell her that he knew her favourite flower. He thought of her every second, every minute, every hour, but he knew it would not work. He would never get the girl because the law should have across the street, they came from different ones of 59 and my 60s perfectly round figure. 60 thought 59 was odd. You see, one of his favourite films was 101 Dalmatians. She preferred the sequel. He romanticised the idea they were star-crossed lovers. They could overcome the odds and evens because they had each other, while she maintained that she was known by her mother that separate could not be equal. And though at the time he felt stupid and dumb for trying to love a girl controlled by her stupid mum, he should have been comforted by that simple standard 59 away from 60. He left with the one. And sure enough, after 2 months of moping around, 61 days later, 61 was who he found. He had lost his keys and his parents were out, so one day after school he rented to a house as he noticed slightly wonky numbers on the door. He wondered why he never introduced himself before. She let him in, his jaw dropped in awe. 61 was like 60 with a little bit more. So she had prettier eyes and an approachable smile. And like him, rough around the edges, casual style. And like him, everything was in disorganized piles. And like him, her different friend stayed a while because she was like him. And he liked her. He reckoned she would like him if she knew he was like her, and it was different this time. I mean, this girl was wicked, so he plucked up the courage and asked for her digit. She said, I'm 61. He grinned, said, I'm 59, and today I've had a really nice time. So tomorrow, if you wanted to come over to mine, she said, sure. She loved talking to someone just as quirky. So she agreed to this unofficial first date. In the end, it was only ready 1 minute early, but that did not matter because she arrived 1 minute late, and from that moment on, there was non-stop chatter. How they loved X Factor, how they had 2 factors, how that did not matter. Distinctiveness made them better. By the end of the night, he knew that they went together on one day. She was talking about stuck-up 60. She noticed that 59 looked a bit shifty. He blushed and told her of his crush, the best thing that never happened because it led to us. 61 was clever, see, not prone to jealousy. She looked him in the eyes and she told him quite tenderly, you're 59, I'm 61, together we combine to become twice what 60 could ever be. And at this point, 59 had tears in his eyes. He was so glad to have this one-of-a-kind girl in his life. He told her the very definition of being promised on himself could his heart divide, and she was the one he wanted to give his heart to. She said she felt the same, and now she knew the films were half true because that was not real love. That love was just a sample. When it came to real love, they were a prime example. Thank you. Thank you so much. I've just made it to the people without the videos on, so I'm going to go back to the start so I can just look at myself. Thank you so much for being here. I had this show that I was touring, and then obviously with lockdown, I wasn't able to do it. And so during the last 6 months, I've written loads of new stuff. So I'm going to do a few of those at the end and cut out some of the middle bits of the show, including me just going on about Solid Crew for about 20 minutes. But this next poem is called Maybe. And when I started writing, it was always a fun thing to do. And I loved playing with language and coming up with rhymes and puns and that kind of thing. And I think for me, that attention to detail is where the mathematical side of things comes in. I love patterns. I love trying to slot things into place so that they make sense to me, even when the rest of the world doesn't. But this was something I realized that as I'd learned to do that, it became a way for me to process the world around me. And I'm a lot more comfortable in who I am now and in my nerdiness now. And part of that is just, I think, in getting older, we learn to accept our bodies and minds a bit more. But this poem I wrote for my cousin who was going through a tough time. And what happened in reality was in the space of a week, 2 different mums came up to me and told me that their child was being bullied at school. And they said, did I have any advice for them? How did I deal with it when it happened to me? And my first thought was, why would you look at me and just assume that I was bullied at school? But one of these mums was my aunt. She's talking about my cousin who was having a tough time, and she's amazing. No one should go through that. But I couldn't think why anyone would want to pick on her. And so I wrote this trying to answer some of the questions I know I at least had when going through that. But it's for anyone who's ever been made to feel small in any way, especially if it's for being different in any way. And I think having obscure interests doesn't help at that age, but it does help for the rest of your life, I firmly believe. So this is called Maybe, and it's for her. Maybe it's because they don't understand you. Maybe it's because they do and they're afraid of what they see. Maybe it's because you are not normal. Maybe normal is not the thing you need to be. Maybe today will be a good day. Maybe today feels like it's way too close to call. Maybe one day you will look back and laugh at this. Maybe one day you will not look back at all. Maybe it feels like it's getting harder. Maybe you're still waiting for that day to come around. Maybe it's because I'm a Londoner that I believe you can't stop building bridges just because one is falling down. Hey, I just met you and this is crazy. But maybe you're going to be the one that saves me. After all, you are wonderful. Right now, this feels like everything. Right now, it always is. It's only afterwards that we can see there's more than this. You can be informed by this without being formed by this, just as a calm before the storm, there is a dark before the dawn in this. Whoever told you must shrink to fit in got their filter wrong. We are not sculptures to be chipped away, but platforms to be built upon. So if somehow this changes you, let it be in a resilience and knowing that you made it through. Do not give them an inkling of a thicker skin. If we stop listening, or can the truth that permeates start sinking in? Not every day is a battle. Not every part of life's a war. It is the times that lie between and need to be worth fighting for. So remember what this moment is. You may not have chosen this, but one day you will be someone who rose from it. When you see the same in others, you can notice this. So show them this. There's no eclipse without some kind of glow in it. Those that know you know to love you. Those that love you, love to know you. Those that don't, they forfeit the right to get to be the ones that mold you. And if you ever meet the old you, say, I come from what you go through. There will be times when that is all you have to hold to. There will be times you cannot help but cry and times you cry for help. There will be times that you resist or are too tired to rebel, and it takes everything. Don't just be defined by someone else. You can start by showing kindness to yourself. Thank you very much. One of the reasons I ran a marathon was because of my mum, who is amazing and who loves running and who just sort of bullies anyone she knows into getting involved with running. But she encouraged me to sign up for the London Marathon. And then a week before it was due to take place, she told us that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And when she found out the news, the first thing she asked the doctor was, will I still be able to run? And it meant the world to her when on her medical report, they included her marathon personal best time because it showed that they understood how important that side of her was. And what she worked out was that because of the cycle of chemotherapy, she would be back at her strongest just before the next dose. And so she decided she was going to try to run to each one of her appointments as a way of claiming back some agency and control when a lot of that was being taken away from her. And various family members and friends ran with her, and she kept a blog while doing this and then turned that blog into a book. And she asked me if I'd write some poems for her book launch. And for me, it felt like a very hard thing to do because I think for me, poetry is a way of capturing snapshots in time or making things permanent. And we still weren't sure how things were going to go. But to come back to the idea of noticing patterns in words, I was able to write this when I discovered that the word chemotherapy already has the word mother in the middle of it. And so from that point, the poem just sort of wrote itself. So it was only 4 lines long. And when I do this live, I feel like there's an awkward silence afterwards, but that's fine because my whole life is an awkward silence right now. But this poem is just called Mother. There is a mother in the middle of chemotherapy. Sitting at the end of reason is a son. But there is a treat at the beginning of each treatment. In amongst the brunt of everything, a run. Thank you very much. I also feel like at this point, when I'm performing, at least, I want to tell people that very thankfully, my mum is doing okay. And not only is she doing okay, in December last year, she turned 20,000 days old, or in Roman numerals, And my mum's incredible. And when she was off having her treatment, she couldn't really stop, and she set up a feminist card company. She was always really frustrated when buying cards for her nieces in particular that it was pink for girls, blue for boys, and not much in between. And since then, she has set up a company, and my wife is involved. So her and my mum just sort of use me as a PA now, which is exciting. But they're called Out of the Box cards, and I fully recommend them. But I asked them. I say I got in touch with them. It's my mum and my wife, so I just said hello. But I asked if they would do me a card to kind of go with the show, because I realised what I've essentially done is just invented a new birthday for myself. And I've always loved birthdays. Even when I was young, I was looking forward to the next big occasion, whether it was double figures, becoming a teenager, legally being able to drive, or buy fireworks, whatever it was. And so I've kind of created a new birthday, because I think birthdays are, in one sense, a way of celebrating life. And I think we could all use as much opportunity as possible to celebrate life right now. But also they're a chance to celebrate people. My nana turned 80 a couple of years ago, and she is always looking after other people. She is often behind the scenes, checking everyone else is okay. And from one weekend, we all came together and just told her how amazing she is. And her birthday was a perfect opportunity to do that. So I've written a birthday poem. Oh my gosh, how can we do this? Is it anyone's birthday today? If it is, just like put your hand up, and I'm going to quickly go through the thing, and then we're going to sort of see if it is. I should have thought of this in advance. Okay, I don't know if it is, but it's someone's birthday today. That is the nature of birthdays, but they might not be celebrating by having a Zoom call at 8:30. Who knows? They're missing out. But this is for anyone whose birthday's coming up. I'd like to dedicate it to my cousin Zach. It was his birthday yesterday. He was 18. And so I'm going to read it off the back of this card because it's excellent product placement. There are roughly 7.7 billion people in the world, and each one had a day that they came to be. That's roughly 7.7 billion and one birthdays, if you count 2 for the Queen. And of these 7.7 billion and one occasions, there's only so many moments where they can take place. Over the course of the year, if we spread out the celebrations, we're talking 21 million birthdays a day. That is 900,000 BPH, births per hour. 15,000 born every minute. Sounds like a very different show. We get 4 1,000ths of a second for our own private party, or share a day with 21 million others that we may or may not know. But this is where we come to you, Zach. Of all the 21 million people in the world that were born today that I have met, you are the best one yet. You are the best one yet. Thank you very much. I was about to say Christmas is coming up, so that would make a lovely Christmas present, but that would only really make a lovely Christmas present for Jesus if you're buying a birthday card. But if you want to buy Jesus a birthday card, I got you sorted, guys. Don't worry about it. I'll just do one more from the show, and then there'll be a couple of new ones. And there's a chance to have a Q&A afterwards. I will happily do that forever because I'm just very excited to be here. It was amazing seeing in the chat where different people are watching from. I'll be honest, I almost started crying before the gig even began. So thank you so much for tuning in, no matter where you are from. But this one is called An A to Z of Time and Space. And I was fully indulging my inner nerdy maths, poetry, fusion boy powers. And I was trying to sum up the history of the world and also go through the alphabet at the same time. Because often when I get lost in these patterns, I discover what I really think about things. And I think even before this year, I feel like perspective is always a useful thing to have. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed with the now. And I find zooming out to be a helpful thing. So I've written a poem which has Zoom in the title, which who knew that was ahead of the times. But it is not about this lovely video conferencing service. But the poem goes like this, and then, I'll just do a couple more, and then I'll take any questions for however long it takes. First there was nothing, I'm talking nothing but nothing, then there was something. In amongst that nothing was something. And some things, some are split into some things, and some things even managed to become things. So take Adam. Adam was added up out of atoms. Before that, it was black and barren. Then it became big and banging. Out of the chaos came countless crazy complex patterns. And then dun, 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 dinosaurs happened. Through evolution, everything's edited every day. That's how we fine-tune, finesse, and then finally find our way. Just as the galaxies have got into gear, the game changed because hip, hip, hooray, Homo sapiens came. And we invent, imagine, inspire, and innovate. We journeyed from jamming in caves to jamming jam in a cake. That knack for knowledge knitted and knotted away like silent caves. We learn the language of living, often a little late. We make music. We maneuver mathematical methods. We've noticed and noted the nodes of our own neural networks overflowing, outpouring, open mics to operatics with a pork percentage purported in pepperami packets. Because we question. From quick quizzes to quantum quarks, revolutions of the heart to renaissances of art, you see, scriptures and science seek signs of the sublime, meanwhile through trees trickles the entirety of time. Our universe is unfinished, but utterly underway. Its vibrancy vibrates via ventricles, valves, and veins. You see, we wonder and we wonder. We explore and we explain. We yearn for what is yonder. As we zoom out into space, we can forget that we were not the first to be here. By any stretch, we wouldn't be the last to leave. And whilst we can't control our history or know our distant future, we can make the most of what might lie between. We can be kind and we can accept the kindness of others. The world shows us what we allow ourselves the time to discover. We can listen, truly listen to another person's needs, not just wait until they've stopped talking to take our turn to speak. We can be brave enough to try and make all kinds of mistakes. We can be playful because what is a life without play? We can remind ourselves each day it's not too late for new beginnings when a single moment handled the whole universe within it. So when we zoom out, we realize how small it becomes. Either none of it matters or all of it does. From atoms, Big Bang, chaos, dinosaurs, evolution. The fine-tuning of the galaxies to humans. Imagine that journey of knowledge through language and music notes overflow with the poetry of quantum revolution. As the sublime trickles through the universe's veins, we wander, explore, yearn, and zoom out once again. So when we zoom out, we realize how small it becomes. So either none of this matters or all of it does. Thank you so much. This next poem is called When This Is Over, and I wrote it quite early on in lockdown when there was that sensation of not having seen friends for a while, and then I would see someone across the street and get really excited and then remember that we couldn't hug. And so it was just very simply coming from that place of yearning. And if anything, that's just got stronger over time. And so I'm grateful for even seeing faces because that's not something historically I've been able to do online. So I'm very grateful for Berwick for putting this on, for Peter and the tech team. But this is for anyone who misses hugging, which I feel like is everyone. When this is over, I will hold you closer than you've ever known. When you see me, you can squeeze me till you feel my very bones. How I long to let you know that I won't want to let you go. There will be so much left to say, yet still some things are better shown. I will wrap my arms around you for the seconds we have lost. Our words will find a way to wait as we locate the weight of us. Though we are changed, there stays a sense of same about the way we touch. Though it is strange, we'll embrace how long it takes us to adjust. The world of everything we knew is somewhere we cannot return. The world of everything that's new is one we'll build from what we've learned. We'd never know ashes could rise again until we'd seen them burn. And the next time I'm stood in front of you, we'll feel like it's been earned. Because when the start has given way, it's only then the end can enter. When the heart is given space, it will forever tend to tender. These affections kept at bay can once again descend to center. Something will have come to yearn as hummingbirds connect to nectar. For all those overwhelming moments where I felt like giving up, there is no point where I was worried we'd forgotten how to love. And when the future's all we've got, well, then that's got to be enough. All that I know is when I'm low that I have wanted to be hugged. And if you'd rather have a handshake, that is absolutely fine. Even a wave from me is saying, I am glad that you're alive, whichever form it takes when this has passed and we've started again. I will no longer take for granted any chances to connect. Thank you. This poem, this will be my penultimate one, just so Chloe's not worrying about having to come in. This one is, I finished writing this on the 16th of March this year, and I performed it once, and I thought this is going to be a good one. And then all theatres were ordered to close, and I've not been able to do it in public since. But at the time, I thought it was about climate change. What it is really about is a sense of powerlessness that, if anything, has been compounded. But I think it's easy to feel like, because there are big things we can't control, we may as well curl up in a ball and give up. And I think if the world's not given up on us, we shouldn't give up on the world. And so I was trying to find inspiration from nature, from things that I'd seen when perseverance had proved to be worth it. And I think one of the joys of leaning into my dual identity of both poet and mathematician is I get to kind of pick and choose which one I am. And when it comes to the idea of impossible, I am much more the poet who bends the rules than the mathematician who sticks hard and fast to them. But this is called Impossible. And yeah, it's about that sense of trying to convince yourself it's worth going on. I'm finding it too easy to tell myself things are too hard, when facing the end that it's too late to even make a start. That if we take impossible to mean that we don't have a chance, we have lost sight of how unlikely it was we would get this far. The way the single fish outwits the shark by sticking with its school. The way the crescent moon outspins its dark to once again be full. Even winter, given long enough, begins to lose its cool. That which was once exceptional now barely registers at all. Flamingos and giraffes look like they were drawn by a child. We can't begin to comprehend all of the ways this world is wild. None of them asked if they were possible before they came to be. None of them have ceased to exist by being told they're make-believe. The bug who finds it all too much and tries to shut off everything. To have recovered and then summoned up the strength to stretch its wings, the snake so full of itself that it cannot help but shed its skin, or how, instead of death, the hedgehog went to bed and slept till spring. To think the earth exists at this specific distance from the sun, down to the angle of the axis on which everything is spun, the fact that trees happen to breathe that which we need inside our lungs. It would all seem impossible had it not already been done. We are impossible to everyone who's ever gone before, and everyone who's yet to come will push impossible some more. Just as indeed the do's we did outdo the don'ts we didn't. So everything's impossible until it isn't. The thought of rivers changing course before somebody gave a damn, or that a tide might turn from shore before a line's drawn in the sand. We cannot know how far our actions go, the impact they might have. Sometimes the only thing that we can do is to do what we can. Just as the night is at its darkest when it's introduced to day, just as the dry is at its harshest in the breath before it rains. It's easy enough to believe in something when it's all okay, but it's when times are at their hardest that it's hardest to have faith. Yet when the lights begin to fade, that's when we need it the most. It's by surviving day to day that we see seasons evolve. If there was never any doubt, there'd be no reason for hope. It could be too late to do anything. It sure as hell is if we don't. And I am tired of that doom and gloom and self-fulfilling prophecies. I'm trying to find room to bloom and self-fulfill the opposites. When it's an act of revolution to try to stay remotely positive, there's nothing wishy-washy about opting to be optimists. Whether a brighter future is possible, we may not truly know. But the first step towards that future is imagining it so. And so, as indeed the do's we did outdo the don'ts we didn't. So it remains impossible until it isn't. And when it's over, and we're no more than old bones within the ground, still the soil knows to sow its seeds from what is broken down. What is lost is always lost until the moment it is found. And these things only ever go one way, unless we turn them round. We are so constantly surrounded that it's easy to forget This world was built upon impossible that has not stopped us yet. So yes, indeed, the do's we did outdo the don'ts we didn't. It only stays impossible until it isn't. Thank you so much. Wonderful. I will do one more, then I'll hand over to Chloe. If you've got any questions, please do chuck them in there. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening, for having me, for tuning in from all sorts. I am online doing various things. If you want to stay in touch, I would love that. But otherwise, I can answer any questions more directly. This last one is another new one, and it's called Unashamed. And what I realize is some poems, some themes I keep coming back to. And one thing in terms of the maths and the poetry, just to bring it back to that, is I was worried that by taking a show up to Edinburgh and putting it in the comedy section, when it's about poetry, that feels niche enough. But to make it about poetry and maths, felt like I was just narrowing that. But I think rather than myself being an intersection of those things, I feel like it's more of a union. And the more I lean into these different parts of myself, the more I can feel like I fill out the person it's possible to me. And so this is kind of a poem to encourage you to fill out yourselves, to not feel like you have to be a particular version of who you are to be accepted, because I think we all need to look after ourselves all of the time. But I think, especially at the moment, it's easy to feel like we focus on what's bad in ourselves. And so, yeah, I wrote this for a friend who was going through a tough time, but it's for anyone who's ever been through anything similar. And just before I forget, it's been amazing to see some friendly faces. I've seen my aunt is in the audience. I've seen people who have given me lifts halfway across Wales in the past. I've seen people who are teachers, who are friends, who are from the States, from India. That just, yeah, it means a lot. So thank you. I hope this is what you expected it to be. I hope no one's surprised that it's me reading poems. But if it is, then thank you for making it this far. Unashamed. It's not your job to make others feel more comfortable. You need not dull your glow in the hope they might see. You need not water down your core to be more palatable. May you be the you that you need you to be, unashamed. We cannot help how others see us, though we may well try our hardest. How we see ourselves can free ourselves to be ourselves regardless. Home is where you can be open-hearted. Whether trapped or trapeze artists, all comes down to how we're harnessed. I'm trying to free my roots, like playing past the parcel packed with parsnips when the music stops and no one's watching. Will you keep on dancing? Let us decorate and garnish any reputations tarnished, because despite it all, I still fancy our chances. Let us not file away our edges in an effort to be smooth. When the records show the dents are how we get into the groove. All that energy expended in the editing of you, I hope one day you'll let it loose and let me be there when you do. Because in that moment when your guard slipped for a second or two, I could have sworn I caught a glimpse and I saw heaven in you. Unashamed. The only time I'll care if you've lost weight is shedding expectations. Unless you're Senator or Ghana, there's no point adopting layers when the heart of you is the part of you that's blazing. And others may have tried to hide this light. You may have joined in this yourself, but joy of joys, the joy of joy is it shall not be overwhelmed. You could be static, or your static could cause lightning storms. Whether it's lions or it's iron ore, your core contains all types of raw. That friction that you feel is an igniting force. So light that torch. If we can't see it in ourselves, then what is brightness for? We do those closest to us a disservice if we only ever let them see the small of us. If we can open up enough to let them get beneath the surface, there's so much more to love if we can show them all of us. The flaws in us, the force of us, the full-on awe of us, the rise and fall in us, the wise and fall in us, yes, all of us, the fine and coarse of us, the fine print in the claws of us, the fire imprinted in our blood cells as they course in us, the core of us, the slightly awkward us, The mouth goes dry when I try talking us. Not sure why, but tonight I'm on form of us. It's all in us. That morning that seems daunting till it dawns on us that there are bits adored in us more than just what's adorning us. The times that have thought of us, the times they fought for us, because if anyone's worth fighting for, of course it's us. It's always us. So call it what you want. There's something calling us. And I have caught enough of you to know that you're enough. So any boxes they may try and stop you with, instead of building up a fort, let's make a rocket ship. Treat them as photos, not negatives developed into positives, but nothing than simply a snapshot of things. Take off from this. Because all the best bits of your story are still yet to be unfurled. You are the caterpillar that becomes the butterfly that flaps its wings to cause an earthquake halfway around the world. And you do not owe this to me. You don't even owe it to you. But if you want it, then deep down, I hope you know it to be true. You are amazing. And if they try to rain on your parade, let it remind you how much fun it is to party while it's raining. May you take up space and stay there, unashamed. Thank you so much. I will just take a dramatic drink of water while I pass you over to Chloe, if that's okay. Thank you. Wonderful. So I think we have a Q&A now, but if it's possible to.
Hey, I'm unmuted. Thank you, Harry.
Wonderful.
That was, I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say that was brilliant. And I feel like in these times when we're all apart, live performances digitally, although feel very different to in person, feels like a way to connect with people. And yeah, that was really great. So thank you. So I've got some questions. If anyone's got some more, please type them in and I'll ask them. So the first one is from Jackie, and she says, when you write a poem, do you start with a theme and look for the word patterns, or does a pattern trigger a theme?
It varies. Some poems, like Paper People, was just me being bored, trying to think of as many words as P that I could. And then it became these extra puns and stuff. And actually, that was one of the first times I felt like I could talk in the first person about what I believed and what my politics were at the time, because I felt like I'd built up this world in which it felt safe to do that. Other poems, like Maybe, very much came from the theme first. And then as I was writing it, it felt like certain lines or images came in later. So it's usually a bit of both. But often there'll be some kind of spark and then a splurge and then an edit. The classic spark, splurge, edit maneuver.
I think you should patent that as a method, actually. Another is, has your style changed at all?
I think so. I think when I first started, I came from a musical background. So that's where the love of rhythm and rhyme is. But I think my very early poems, you can almost see me nodding along to a metronome. Whereas I've got a lot more comfortable with the spaces in between the rhythm. And also because I used to do these poetry slams, all of my poems were pretty much 3 minutes long and there was no time to introduce them or give them context. Whereas now I love having a bit more space around it. More recently in the last 6 months, not having physical audiences to perform to, I feel like the things I've written are less reliant on that and a bit more thoughtful, possibly, because if your desired response is silence, then it's already a success.
A surprise highlight of digital performance.
Exactly.
Someone says, I'm a songwriter who wants to write poetry as well. What's the difference?
I am a firm believer that songs can be poetry. Songs exist as poetry. And similarly, I think if you want to put poetry to music, it doesn't automatically have to turn into bad rap, which is what I think some people feel. They think for it to be musical, you have to be able to hear the beat. And I think music has such an amazing way of elevating words and of expressing certain emotions. And whenever I listen to songs, it's the lyrics that jump out to me. But I've got a friend who's a bass player who hears that first and foremost. And isn't that fussed about the lyrics. So I think everyone has their different things. But I think for me, if you can, read your lyrics as a poem, then by all means, that gives people a chance to take them in differently. I think when I first started, I loved poetry because it was just words. And beforehand, I'd written words and was performing them whilst 3 of my friends played electric guitar as loudly as possible. So you couldn't really hear what you were saying. It was just exciting to be on stage in a scout hut. But I think, I love poetry because of the space it gives the words. And music can absolutely add to that or be a vehicle for it, at least.
Mm-hmm. Here's one which is maybe a contender for current favourite question. Are you using an auto cue? If not, how do you do it? And then question mark and 5 exclamation marks.
Great. I read one poem off the screen, the marathon one, just because the numbers are very specific and you can't make them up. Ordinarily, I love knowing my poems off by heart and being able to perform them. And I would be gigging so regularly that they were ingrained in my bones. And then it was a weird thing having that taken away. And also realizing that I'm performing to a computer. And so when I've got something new, I can just read it off the screen. And that's the closest I get to having an auto cue, whereas ordinarily you wouldn't. But for me, part of the writing process is speaking out loud and it feeling like it comes alive. And actually, some poems don't feel finished until they're performed to an audience, which is why it feels strange that I have a few new poems that I like, but I don't know if they're fully finished and ready for the world until I get that sense of performing them in a room, I think.
Someone says, totally in awe of your work. Has it ever gotten difficult to toggle between the poetry and the math headspaces? And do you ever feel at war and have a feeling of not being able to do justice to both?
Good question. I think one of the driving forces for me was never wanting to go too deep down either rabbit hole. And I think even when I was writing a poem about prime numbers early on, I wanted it to be accessible to people who perhaps didn't love maths as much as me. And so I focused on the story side of it. And I think even when I was studying maths at university, a lot of the intricacies I started to get lost in, but I loved the broader concepts of what it means to add things together or what numbers are. And so I think I've really enjoyed more recently not having the pressure of exams or textbooks or anything and being able to read around maths and just enjoy it for the sake of it. And so this is the most mathsy I've felt in my poetry. And I don't know if that's a phase or if I'll end up doing something very different next. But at the moment, I've been pleasantly surprised how many people have been willing to come on that journey of getting more mathsy, because I honestly think a lot of people are put off either maths or poetry through some kind of negative experience of it. And I think there is so much in there that is brilliant and is accessible and people can love. But I'm obviously very biased as someone who's spent a lot of my life doing both.
I think there's something interesting about when people have negative connotations and you potentially have slightly flipped them on their head. Someone says, how many drafts and how long did it take you to write the last 2 poems that you performed? And is there an average of the poems that you write?
Yes, so the last 2, there were a lot of drafts, partly because I've been at home a lot. And there's an excitement when I'm writing a poem where I feel like it's going to be good. And that is not every poem. But those 2, I think because there was a personal nature to them and because they felt like they were longer kind of, I guess, lists, they got very long and then had to be cut down. And so there are still multiple versions of it, because I honestly think when I'm performing a poem on stage, I will get to a part of it and suddenly realize, oh, this doesn't make sense to anyone apart from me. And sometimes that's fine. Some poems are very personal and that's enough. But with those poems, the current versions are definitely a fair few drafts in. I used to say it took me a couple of months to write a poem, but I started a podcast during lockdown where I was writing a new poem every week. So sometimes I think it's just good to give yourself deadlines. And sometimes I think it's good to take the pressure off, and not everything I write has to be a masterpiece or better than anything I've ever done, I still find it fun to write for the sake of it. And so that was quite a liberating thing, having the time and space to do that without necessarily going into judged competitions where people then give your heartfelt piece of work 2 out of 10.
Someone says, what poetry book would you recommend that everybody reads?
The first one that comes to mind is Don't Put Mustard in the Custard by Michael Rosen, which is illustrated by Quentin Blake. And that made me fall in love with words. And I've got 2 nieces who are 3 and 5, and they've got the audiobook, and I've been able to read that to them. And I think it's just fun, and it's silly, and it's language, and yet it's also poignant and it's heartfelt. And I think for me, poetry is about being able to have those, I guess, 2 extremes. But yeah, that's the first one that comes to mind.
That's a good suggestion. Okay, I'm going to do one more question, which is somebody says the sound of P and M, so the letters P and M, are very present in your work. Is that because of poet and mathematician or another reason?
I really want to say yes. Yeah, why not? I'll take that. I think that's interesting. P is a very, it's a plosive sound. And so I loved trying to have words that had 2 P's in it, because it felt like there was a natural paciness to it. And then it takes you on the journey. And actually my favorite part of that poem is when the P's drop out and suddenly there's a comparative softness to it. Whereas I think something like Maybe feels like a much more tender poem, as having the softer sound of the M felt like a natural way into each of those statements. But for poet and mathematician, I will absolutely take that.
Happy coincidence.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave the questions there. Otherwise, I'm aware that we could probably talk all night.
Cool.
Harry, I'd like to thank you again for a really great evening. You can buy a copy of Harry's book, The Sunshine Kid, and other merch on his website. Look at that, well-timed marketing, slick marketing. Harry's website is www.harrybaker.co. And if you've enjoyed tonight's session, there's a possibility to donate to the festival, and there'll be a link that will come up in the chat window. We're a very small festival run by volunteers, and we rely mostly on sponsorship from local patrons and businesses, and anything is very welcome. I'd like to thank you all for being here virtually this evening from all around the world. Our 8th festival will take place from the 14th to the 17th of October 2021. And maybe we'll see you there, perhaps virtually, perhaps in Berwick. So thanks again, Harry. Thanks everyone for watching. And I hope you'll have a lovely night. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.